My people, let's continue. 2 years and 2 seasons into the Gamma Haven series, the world is still very young, world building wise. The prequel and the first 2 seasons were laying a foundation that would be cemented by the first generation of players. With every player having their own goals and being wrapped up in their own story arcs, it can be easy to lose sight of the overarching storyline and the impact that the characters had on it. So let's recap the most important events of the series thus far. The prequel. The prequel was a special period of Gamma Haven history. It was essentially a beta that was ran within a private Facebook group. The first series of events immediately would begin to motivate the characters, driving them toward their own storylines. It begins with Haven City, showing how much of an ugly city Haven was. It became worse when a mysterious explosion erupts in the sky, causing a nuclear storm to ensue, drenching the inhabitants of the city in gamma radiation. This causes the crime rate to climb exponentially as terrible people begin to mutate and gain special abilities that they only use for themselves. The streets are suddenly flooded with deadly black market weaponry that causes a disruptive shift in power in the city and lots of death. An infamous weapon engineer named Porter Van Lith is responsible for putting these exotic firearms into the hands of factions, ultimately leading to the assassination of Master Wong, the Emperor of Haven's largest, most powerful faction, Bloodvein Dynasty. The hired assailant, Ryan Zaidi, purposefully used one of Porter Van Lith's exotic underground black market weapons to create war and chaos between underground factions. A Haven City task force led by Agent Goldbrand sends a group of agents to crash an organized black market auction, bringing the crime wave to a halt. However, Anarchy 12, who was one of the agents hired, betrays the group and takes this opportunity to capitalize on the auction for himself. Anarchy learns that Porter Van Lith extracted the technology he used for the weapons from a crashed alien ship. The same ship that caused the gamma explosion to begin with. Anarchy investigates the abandoned crash site at the Porter Van Lith Sea Labs, and is where he would briefly encounter the Uncown alien race, which would turn him away with unfathomable fear waves, but not before Anarchy is able to retrieve data from the crashed ship, learning that there is more beyond their planet. A whole universe. That's right. When Anarchy learns that existence spans beyond the planet, he begins to wonder how and why someone as intelligent as himself never thought to research or discover such a simple curiosity. It was then made apparent that something about their existence was suspicious. Meanwhile, in the city, tension is rising as mutants become a threat to all those around them. 50% of those who begin to mutate end up mass mutating. A phenomenon where the subject becomes an overgrown mass of flesh, while their abilities go berserk, harming everyone around them, including themselves. We would see this at its worst when a case of mass mutation becomes so severe it causes others to mutate and get pulled into a gigantic mass called the Gamma Fiend, a mass of innocent mutants in agony causing havoc and destruction to a great portion of the city. This terror forced enemies to work together and would soon be destroyed by the combined efforts of Tempest, R-Type X, and Anarchy 12. The Gamma Fiend painted an image of death that misrepresented what mutants stood for, and mutants would now be seen as a threat. For this reason, we would begin to see the Governor of Haven retaliate against all mutant kind, which becomes the premise for Season 1. Season 1. In Season 1, my goal was to create tension between groups and within those groups. I wanted players to deal with civil turmoil, all while some characters learning that the scope is larger than what was being shown. I wanted to show that there can be layers to the story for all character types, from mundane street-level escapades to high-powered romps and universal crises. The city becomes divided when the governor attempts to quarantine and/or remove all mutants from the city. We are then introduced to Gordon Gale, an influential street magician who quickly became a savior to all mutants by providing a haven for mutants away from hate and violence called the Gate Center. This inspired many mutants to fight for their rights and stand up against those who wished to strip them of the right to live. We are then introduced to a mysterious, influential villain named the Advocate, a blue-skinned mutant with the ability to manipulate perception with parasitic lies and to be many people at once with one hive mind. By becoming a fraction of the population and spreading its influence, Advocate challenges Tempest's influence, attacks his character, friends, and family as the two begin to tug a war over the perception of the people of Haven. Tempest wants harmony and understanding, while Advocate wants chaos and bloodshed in favor of mutant kind. This bolsters a particular population of mutants who feel superior and develop a hate for those who aren't mutants. We then learn that a secret society called the Survey exists. These cultists worship entities they refer to as the Green Gods, deities who have tasked them to create the ultimate mutant using rituals and dark magic. If they fail to create the ultimate G-type during a lifetime, the Green Gods would then come and destroy all life with what is prophesied as the Light. After the Light destroys everything, the most loyal Survey cultists have their souls reincarnated into new bodies for the continuation of their work for their gods. This is achieved with what the cultists call the gift in the heart of the planet, a large magitech machine called the Ikermancer. It siphons the souls of the dead cultists and redistributes them back into new bodies prepared and laid upon emeralds during an elaborate Survey ritual. Over the course of the season, Tempest encounters the Survey and liberates their captives because, in addition to experimenting on the people, the cultists also feed on them as well. Using data extracted from the Porter Vanilith's discovery, Anarchy 12 tracks the whereabouts of these aliens and captures one, meddling with Survey cultists one night. Soon after, he learns the truth about the so-called Green Gods when he interrogates one for himself. Anarchy discovers that these are no gods at all and are merely highly advanced extraterrestrials called the Uncown, who are colluding with the powerful magitech scientist named the Instigator, a powerful lich who is responsible for bestowing the gift of dark magic and reincarnation upon the cult, manipulating them from behind the illusion of a god. On a side note, this would mark the first time that I gave a new player entering the game a major role in the show. Before the season started, I knew that I would need a villain to be behind the scenes and responsible for the whole operation of what was going on in the tank, so I thought it would be cool to have a new unrevealed player or character take the role of this villain. So when I saw the player's Lich character, who had the ability of magic and science, I thought to myself, perfect, because it would take magic and science to achieve something like this. The player agreed to be the villain, so I told him to sit tight so I could introduce him into the world. He had no idea how I would introduce him because I didn't want to give away the plot. So for the first half of the season, my goal was to make it apparent that this whole reality was being orchestrated by the Instigator. Let's continue. With the Uncown's technology and the Instigator's magic, they attempt to create the ultimate gamma type for an intergalactic mutant slave trade. We learn that gamma types are essentially golems created using dark magic, advanced coding, and gamma radiation. These beings are called gamma types, or G types for short, and are improved upon by having them live repeated lifetimes called cycles, where they are subject to traumatic living conditions in order to become the best versions of themselves. After a cycle is purged and a new one is started, the Instigator will reset their memories, rearrange each G-type's living conditions, and then press play. To pick up where he left off, evolution-wise, the Instigator would upload a patch of code into each G-type with their past life experiences and instincts using gamma radiation that contains the data. This is called a gamma calamity, a catastrophic event that passes on code and triggers an awakening of their mutant abilities. Anarchy is asked to assist in fulfilling the final ritual to bring their plans to fruition. He's promised a second life and an opportunity to have the world his way, and so Anarchy accepts. He learns that Advocate is the instigator's tool to create chaos which is needed to power the ritual, and so Anarchy contributes. A powerful gamma type and the instigator's favored specimen, R-Type X, is sifted out of the general G-type population, proving he is the ultimate G-type as expected. During the final phase of the ritual, the ultimate G-type is put to a final test and is pit against powerful G-type candidates produced by the Survey cult called Ritual G-types. R-Type X arose victorious, but the Uncown were still unimpressed by R-Type X and had already chosen the so-called ultimate G-type that they wanted from that cycle. The instigator needed more time for R-Type X to peak, and he watched intensely as R-Type X showed his power by fighting off the light, a Magitech golem created by the instigator whose purpose was to erase and purge the tank clean so they could start a new cycle. R-Type X manages to destroy the light and gets a brief glimpse of what is behind the curtain, targeting the instigator and the Uncown, but not before the Uncown flipped the kill switch, neutralizing R-Type X by turning him into an abomination. The Uncown select their favored G-type for the trade and request that the instigator focus his efforts on Anarchy 12 during the next cycle. They were impressed by his ability to get so far as to capture them and learn of their existence. Angered, the instigator obliges and sets the next cycle of the tank up to cater to Anarchy's values and provides an environment to foster his evolution. The instigator then erases Anarchy's memory of their alliance and the ritual as to not impede the way he conducts himself during the next cycle, as the instigator observes and instigates. But things wouldn't go as planned, because the instigator and the Uncown slave traders are then attacked by pirate bounty hunters who have come to collect the wanted Lich. Mistress Scorn, the space diplomat, is introduced as the first player character visiting from outside the tank. The instigator is then forced to flee into the tank just as the new Anarchy cycle begins, just before the scheduled Gamma Calamity. Again, the Gamma Calamity is a procedure carried out by the instigator in which computer code, data, and experience is uploaded or patched into every being on the planet through gamma radiation. The radiation triggers mutation within G-types, which allows them to pick up where they left off from the previous cycle. It was a very hostile period, and the instigator is not only caught up in his own mess, but he's immediately shot out of the sky and captured by Anarchy 12. It wouldn't be until the latter half of the season that I would relinquish full control over to the player of the instigator, which was symbolized by having him retreat into the tank with quote-unquote everyone else. Season 2 would start at the beginning of a fresh new cycle, Cycle 77. Season 2 was quite eventful for several reasons. It is the cycle of Anarchy, a survival of the fittest culture, giving Anarchy the upper hand by having full control of the city straight from the beginning of time. This was Anarchy's reward for siding with the victors, the Survey and the Instigator. If Anarchy seemed hard to overcome, it was because he always had the advantage. It was supposed to be that way. He was the city. It would take a persistent and successful collaborative effort to overcome Anarchy, which we started to see traction gained until other X factors entered the mix, upsetting the balance of good, neutral, and evil. Player characters such as Ivan Bakara, Rezanok Fenris, and even NPCs like Deftude begin to put a spin on events as they unfold. Early in the season, Tempest discovers a temporal anomaly containing frozen sound that his past cycle self left for his future self. He learns that there is a powerful cult that will attempt to destroy the world with light. Cryptic and incomplete, this was enough to motivate Tempest to prepare for the prophesized doom by creating an elite team of gate agents. Using fragments of visions from failed cycles of the past, Tempest avoids making bad moves and becomes more successful in how he operates. He must deal with Anarchy's killer androids impeding the growth of his agents, all while still protecting the people of Haven City under Anarchy's no-hero rule. Tempest would receive help on that front when a hero named Jacob Bastion begins to stick it to Anarchy with his own faction of rebel mercenaries called Haven Guard. Tempest's goal to save everyone's future is expedited when a street rat named Timbrous Gray shows up with a device that allows him to remember all past cycles. He shares this vision with Tempest, giving him the whole picture. Meanwhile, we learn that another scientist and lich named Deftitude is an ex-partner of the Instigator who has worked from the shadows within the tank to fulfill his own goals, often conflicting with the Instigators. Deftitude's goal was to create the ultimate G-type to be a vessel for his own lord and savior, Nuad, the Emperor of the Endless, a powerful lich god that the Instigator has tried to keep suppressed but fails to. We learned that in the beginning of the tank's operations, the Instigator was not alone in colluding with the Uncown. The Instigator was part of a small band of lich scientists who fled from the law to the outer rim of the galaxy in order to conduct their forbidden experiments in private. These scientists were the Instigator, Zemina, Deftitude, and Mimiku. Their group would slowly dissolve after the lead scientist Mimiku disbanded from insanity, followed by a fallout between Deftitude and the Instigator. Deftitude believed in a hands-on approach, whereas the Instigator preferred to be behind the scenes. After Deftitude's favored experiment, the Gamma Type 2, has gone missing, he blames the Instigator and enters the tank himself to find his creation, going off the radar and never found again by the Instigator. This was a true fall from grace, and the Instigator now found himself a hostage of his own creation. Anarchy 12 probes the Instigator's mind of all he knows, just before the Instigator is able to escape imprisonment. Mr. Scorn offers Anarchy an intergalactic business deal that would have him be labeled ruler of this planet as it is inducted into the galactic expanse, making it officially part of a star system, resulting in a lucrative and politically beneficial position. She offers this, as well as being his ambassador, in return for custody of the Instigator and access to mutants that she can trade into the slaver business. Meanwhile, Deftitude becomes incredibly active as his sacred plans to revive his lord come closer to fruition. Deftitude's favored specimen is an alien that he smuggled from outside of the tank named Rezanok Fenrius, whom he manipulates in order to reach his full potential. Rezanok is Deftitude's version of R-Type X and is a superior specimen due to not being limited by how much code he can possess. Deftitude allows Rezanok to consume the entirety of the Gamma Calamity, thus receiving majority of the evolutionary code that was meant for the world. Deftitude would then manipulate Rezanok further into mating with the G-type to create the perfect hybrid vessel and offspring, leaving the mother and Rezanok for dead and making off with their child. We then learn of a powerful artifact called the Fist of the Endless that contains the Emperor of the Endless. It emerges, and Haven Guard is able to obtain it briefly before losing it to Anarchy 12. Anarchy 12 is then betrayed by Ivan Bakara and tricked into equipping a cursed version of the Fist, thus trapping his mind in a magical illusion forever. In his absence, a faction led by rogue androids called Nox lure Haven Guard into a war with an outcast faction that were old enemies of Anarchy 12 led by an android who rebelled against him once upon a time. Tempest and Haven Guard join forces to prevent these androids from causing mutant genocide by way of a virus called End of Enders. Haven Guard overcomes and defeats Nox only to discover that Anarchy 12 has returned from his hiatus by uploading a duplicate of his consciousness into a special android named the Collective. Upon his return, he attempts to complete his attack on Haven Guard by flourishing with his long-planned infiltration of their ranks with sleeper androids. ultra-realistic androids sent to spy and destroy them from within. However, Jacob was privy and turns the tables on Anarchy, evading the full brunt of the attack and destroying Anarchy's army of hostile sleepers. Meanwhile, Deftude attempts to resurrect the endless lich god Nuad, but is ambushed by an unforeseen enemy, the Network. Led by Ivan Bakara and a pissed-off Rezanok Fenrius equipped with the Fist of the Endless, Deftude and his cabal are seemingly prepared for the attack, but would soon be circumvented and defeated by R-Type X and the Gokin. Which brings us to now. The planet-sized apparatus known as the Tank drifts aimlessly through space. Fixed within its damaged shell, the artificial planet you all know as home lies depleted of its resources, expiring rapidly from the abandonment of its previous operating overlords. Doom looms on the horizon of its inhabitants. Or does it? Mistress Scorn, the pirate diplomat who arrived in pursuit of said overlords, has come to realize the unprecedented value in a planet filled with mutants that have been meticulously designed and improved over several lifetimes. The universe was a wild place. There was no weapon like a mutant oblivious of its true existence. Malleable. Scorn observes millions of information threads shooting across her monitors as she considers her options. If this planet continues moving deeper into the Necrofiend home star system, all, including her life, will be snatched away once discovered. Necrofiends are a race of lich. There is zero value, only death, when dealing with the Necrofiend kind. There is even less value in negotiating any further with the Virgin Tears Galactic Expanse, who had just tried to obliterate the entire tank. They wanted no parts of the artificial planet containing monsters that they couldn't control. Scorn's partner, the legendary space pirate Nova, and his men enter her quarters, dragging with them a battered and beaten Korgan uprooted from hiding. This was the G-type, who could manipulate the planet's trajectory through space. Nova tosses him toward the floor and places his boot on the back of his head. Scorn glares at Korgan with a myriad of arachnid eyes blanketed across her lovely porcelain face. She easily talks him out of his loyalty to his now defeated master, Deftude, and commands Korgan to bring the planet's course to a complete halt. This last task pushes Korgan to his limits, and finally succumbs to his wounds suffered during the Network ambush and his escape from the Nebi capital. Doug, Scorn's assistant, arrives with great news. He has gotten in contact with the mayor of a space station located not too far on the outskirts of the Necrofiend star system. If everything goes as planned, they may be able to help Scorn pull her gold mine to a safer location, and maybe even do business themselves. Scorn proceeds and arranges for their leaders to arrive to the tank and discuss their next moves. Meanwhile, within the tank, months have passed and we find its inhabitants in somewhat of a cold war, partly due to the effect of the depleting resources that once kept the tank operational. A significant span of time has passed without a gamma calamity to bring fresh new data. Whether it was a flaw in the instigator's methods or a ploy to force purchasers of G-types to return to the Uncound and the instigator slave traders for upgrades, the intensity of everyone's mutations have in turn simmered down and normalized. Since Anarchy 12 has returned, he is kept to himself after his attempt to chop the head off of the Haven Guard like he did Gate. He had more success in his chess move using the Haven Guard to destroy his own enemies, the rogue androids of Nox, stationed in the Iron Mountains. However, now more than ever, androids played a prominent part in society, not all necessarily under Anarchy. They do walk the streets free from his control, and are instead filled with the abyssal spirits distributed by Ivan Bakara's Ikermancer. The Haven Guard has begun to rebuild and recover while laying low deep within the Western Ward mines. After the defeat of the Red Android, Jacob has arrested and brought in all Iron Republic refugees to the city of Haven so that they could live in better conditions, also under the watchful eye of the Haven Guard. The Haven Gate base sits idle and inoperable by choice, without the necessary technological resources not only to get it working again, but also to ensure its security from Anarchy's ploys. Both the leader of Haven Guard, Jacob Bastion, and the leader of Gate, Tempest, have decided to table its use until they could safely sustain it. As of now, the base was more of a symbol of their alliance and victory over Nox. Despite their setback, Haven Guard and Gate have had great success with keeping Haven City a safe place, ushering in what you could consider a golden age. A period of time where crime has been suppressed, the Nagamatos missing, and people have begun making a living off of their trade, no longer hampered by the Nagamato crime lords and no longer fed on by the Takena cultists. Haven City was no longer an ugly city. Haven City was, well, maybe it's too soon to say. One thing was for certain, though. The planet has begun to change. The entire eastern continent of Nibu has become enveloped in deep, plentiful greens and violets, almost prehistoric in nature, and this was absolutely real nature. The death of the island girl Epony has triggered the creation of absolute nature, rendering the entire half of the planet into an actual planet, and still growing. Within its growth, the Raylagorian king, the Wanderer, Ryu Sengoku, remains vigilant during the planet's evolution, as if waiting and watching out for something ominous. He can feel the presence of something in the world, but couldn't put his finger on it just yet. What he does know is that with a planet being born under his very own feet, he must stand between it and anything threatening its growth. However, it was also a great time to live and enjoy life. What will you do? What role will you play in the world? It's Gamma Haven Season 3. Stay tuned as we begin to flesh out the remaining races and districts so we can kick this season off, but not before you hit the like button to stoke the flames of creation. Subscribe if you're into stuff like this, and I will see you next time.